Have you ever seen a star take their final breath in the spotlight, giving everything to the music that made them immortal? It sounds like legend, but for some Black performers, the stage was more than a place of triumph. It became their final resting place. No encores, no farewells. Just gasps from the crowd and a haunting silence where applause once roared. In this video, we honor 10 Black musicians and performers who died doing what they loved most. Right there on stage, mid-song, mid-dream. From heart attacks beneath blazing lights to final bows that turned into heartbreaking farewells, their last moments weren't met with whispers, they were met with ovations. Which of these unforgettable goodbyes will stay with you the longest? Keep watching, because the final story might just stop your heart. Papa Wemba, the king who died wearing his crown. April 2016. Ivory Coast. The night sky pulsed with anticipation as thousands gathered at the Festival de Musiques Urbaines d'Inimabo. But they didn't just come for music, they came for magic. On stage stood Jules Shungu Wembadio Pin Kikumba, known across the world as Papa Wemba, the godfather of Congolese rumba, the fashion icon, the man whose voice could move an entire continent. At 66, draped in his signature flamboyant sapeur style, he wasn't just performing, he was reigning. His voice rang out smooth and powerful, the rhythm infectious, the band tight, the crowd hypnotized. It was more than a concert, it was a celebration of a king still on his throne. And then, in one devastating moment, everything stopped. Mid-song, mid-glory, Papa Wemba stumbled. At first, the crowd thought it was part of the show. But then he crumpled to the floor. Silence fell. Dancers froze. The stage that moments earlier had roared with life was now gripped by confusion and dread. Paramedics rushed in, but the legend had already taken his final bow. Some reports said it was a seizure, others a heart attack. But the truth didn't matter. What mattered was this: Africa had just lost one of its brightest voices, live, under the blinding stage lights, mic still in hand. Papa Wemba died the way legends do, doing what he loved, in front of the people who adored him. It was heartbreak in real time. One moment the crowd danced to the rhythm of a king. The next, they stood in stunned mourning. His death wasn't just an end, it was a final act of poetic tragedy. A monarch collapsing on his battlefield. A voice silenced mid-song. But perhaps there's beauty in that too. Because when a king dies with his crown on, his legacy doesn't fade. It echoes. Forever. Now ask yourself, if the fall of a king could shake the earth, what will happen when Mama Africa herself sings her last song? Miriam Makiba. November 9, 2008. Castel Volturno, Italy. The lights dimmed. The crowd rose to their feet. And there she stood, regal, resolute, radiant. Miriam Makiba, the soul of South Africa. The rebel voice that shook empires. The world called her Mama Africa, but on that night, she was more than an icon. She was a warrior with a microphone. At 76, she still moved with grace, carried the weight of history in her voice, and wore resistance like a crown. This wasn't just a concert. It was a statement, a stand for truth. She had come to support Italian author Roberto Saviano, a man marked for death by the mafia after exposing their secrets in his book Gomorrah. And who better to stand beside him than a woman who had spent her life confronting power with nothing but a song? She began to sing. Pa burst forth, vibrant, joyful, defiant. The crowd swayed, clapped, cried. For a moment, time vanished. She was ageless, fearless, pure fire. Thunderous applause filled the air, not just for the music, but for everything she represented. She bowed, radiant. A queen in full command. And then, the unthinkable. As she turned to leave the stage, her heart gave out. No warning. No goodbye. The rhythm that once carried entire nations through pain and hope stopped in a single breath. She collapsed. Paramedics rushed her to a nearby clinic. But it was already over. A massive heart attack silenced one of the fiercest voices the world had ever known. It was heartbreakingly poetic. For more than 30 years, apartheid exiled her from her homeland. She lost lovers, buried friends, carried the burden of being a Black woman unafraid to speak in a white-dominated world. Through it all, she held to one sacred vow: "I will sing until the day I die." And she did. Her final performance wasn't a farewell. It was a war cry. A hymn to justice. A love song to freedom. Miriam Makiba didn't fade away. She left us standing, stunned, with her voice still echoing in the air, like thunder after lightning. A powerful woman. A powerful end. But oh, how it breaks the heart when a song like hers ends forever. Fatman Scoop. The voice. The energy. The legend. August 30th, 2024, Hampton Town Center Park, Connecticut. It was supposed to be a night of pure joy, a free summer concert under the stars where the only rule was to dance, scream, and feel alive. And who better to bring that fire than Fatman Scoop himself? Isaac Freeman III, the thunder behind the mic, the ultimate hype man. At 53, he still moved like a man half his age. Known for crowd-shaking anthems like Be Faithful and iconic shout-outs with Missy Elliott and Ciara, he didn't just perform, he erupted. "Engine number 9, he shouted, and the crowd exploded with him. Every bounce, every beat, every call and response made the ground shake. He wasn't just on stage, he was the stage. Then it happened. No warning. A stumble. A second later, Fatman Scoop collapsed. One moment, he was larger than life, roaring, radiant, electric. The next he was still, motionless. Gasps ripped through the crowd. The music stopped. His team ran. Fans screamed. Paramedics stormed the stage. Time froze as they fought to revive the man whose voice had always been full of life. He was rushed to the hospital. But the news that followed crushed hearts around the world. Fatman Scoop, the man who turned arenas into stampedes of sound, had hyped his last crowd. The official cause wasn't immediately released. But in that moment, all anyone could feel was the silence. The kind that pierces. The kind that lingers. For those in the audience, it wasn't just a tragedy, it was a nightmare. They came for joy and left haunted. Because that night, they didn't just lose a performer. They watched a giant fall. His voice, the life of every party, the pulse of a generation, went quiet. And that silence? It's still echoing. Tammy Terrell. October 14, 1967. Hampton-Sydney College, Virginia. The crowd was electric. Motown was on fire, and two of its brightest stars lit up the stage. Marvin Gaye, smooth, magnetic, and Tammy Terrell, radiant, full of life, and glowing with promise. Together, they were unstoppable. Their voices, woven into classics like Ain't No Mountain High Enough and Your Precious Love, had become the soundtrack of Black love, young dreams, and timeless soul. But behind Tammy's dazzling smile, something dark was stirring. For weeks, she'd been plagued by crushing headaches, sharp, relentless, unforgiving. Still, she pushed through. A consummate performer, she refused to let the pain dim her fire. And then, in the middle of a song, everything changed. Tammy stumbled. Her legs gave out. And right there on stage, before a stunned audience, she collapsed into Marvin's arms. The music stopped. The crowd held its breath. Marvin, horrified and helpless, carried her off stage in silence. She was only 22. The diagnosis was devastating, a malignant brain tumor. That fall wasn't just a medical emergency, it was the first cruel blow in a slow, painful goodbye. Tammy endured multiple surgeries, waves of agony, and the slow unraveling of a once vibrant body. Yet somehow, she still found the strength to sing. She recorded with Marvin from a wheelchair, her voice still angelic, even as her body betrayed her. But she would never return to that stage. On March 16, 1970, just a month before her 25th birthday, Tammy Terrell died. Gone far too soon. That night in Virginia wasn't just a collapse, it was a haunting prelude. A tragic foreshadowing of the storm to come. And if that moment broke your heart, imagine a rock legend somewhere else in the world, unleashing one final soul-shaking guitar solo, pouring out everything he had, only to vanish before the final bow. Some stars don't fade. They fall, mid-song, with the whole world watching. Johnny Guitar Watson. May 17, 1996. Yokohama, Japan. They called him the gangster of love. The funked-out Superman of soul. A fire starter with 6 strings and a voice dipped in swagger. This wasn't some aging icon chasing faded fame. This was Johnny Guitar Watson, live and electric, still rewriting the rules of cool at 61. From the razor-edged blues of the 50s to the slick, funk-drenched grooves of the 70s, Johnny didn't just play music, he transformed it. Hendrix idolized him. Zappa revered him. He was a pioneer, a shapeshifter, a legend who never stopped evolving. And on this night in Yokohama, he was on fire. The Ocean Boulevard Cafe pulsed with heat, soul, and anticipation. Fans swayed, hypnotized by the rhythm. Watson stood center stage, guitar screaming under the lights, pouring every ounce of himself into the groove. This was his world, his kingdom. Every note was a declaration. Every riff, a piece of his soul. Then, without warning, it all stopped. Mid-solo, mid-scream, mid-transcendence, he collapsed. The crowd froze. The room, moments ago alive with sound and sweat, turned to stunned silence. Paramedics rushed in. The stage lights flickered, uncertain. But the truth came fast and brutal. Johnny Guitar Watson was gone. A massive heart attack had taken him instantly. His guitar still strapped to his chest. He didn't just die. He departed in the most poetic, gut-wrenching way imaginable. On stage, giving everything. In the very act of creating magic. A true showman, right to his final breath. For fans in Japan and around the world, it was unthinkable. The groove had stopped. The master was gone. But if there's a rock and roll way to leave this world, this was it. Guitar in hand. Spotlight warm. Soul still ringing in the air. Now picture this, a piano man, another kind of legend, taking his final breath with his fingers still dancing across the keys. That story is coming next. Tuts, Washington, August 5, 1984. New Orleans, Louisiana. The World's Fair was alive with color, culture, and celebration. But in a city like New Orleans, no event, no matter how grand, felt complete without music pulsing through its streets. And no one embodied that sound, that soul, quite like Isidor, Tuts, Washington. At 77 years old, Tuts wasn't just playing the piano, he was telling the story of New Orleans through every note. His hands moved like whispers over the keys, each touch shaped by a lifetime steeped in jazz, blues, and the heartbeat of the Crescent City. He didn't seek the spotlight. He didn't need to. To those who truly knew the music of New Orleans, Tuts was royalty, humble, soulful, and irreplaceable. He learned from the greats, and then quietly became one. A living bridge between past and present, he carried the city's musical history in his fingertips. That afternoon, under the glow of stage lights and in front of an audience gathered from around the world, Tuts delivered more than a performance. He gave them memories wrapped in melody, his style intricate, gentle, full of swing and blues-soaked grace. Then, as the music soared and the crowd held its breath, the unthinkable happened. The piano went quiet. Tuts Washington collapsed mid-performance, his heart giving out as he poured his own into the music. It was devastating, but it was also hauntingly poetic. He didn't fade away in silence or obscurity. He left this world doing what he loved, in the city that raised him at one of its most celebrated events. It wasn't just a death, it was a final bow. A soulful farewell as moving as any ballad. Tuts Washington didn't just play the music of New Orleans. He was the music. And when he passed, it felt like the city itself held a long, silent note in his honor. A moment of pure reverence suspended in time. Lil Harden Armstrong. August 27, 1971. Chicago, Illinois. The jazz world was still reeling from the loss of Louis Satchmo Armstrong, its trumpet king, who had passed away just weeks before. That day, the Chicago Civic Center Plaza hosted a televised memorial concert in his honor. And among those paying tribute was a woman who knew him better than most, Lil Harden Armstrong, his second wife, his creative partner, and a jazz legend in her own right. Lil wasn't just Louis's former spouse. She was a trailblazer, a brilliant pianist, a bold bandleader, and the very woman who had helped shape him into the global star he became. She didn't stand in his shadow, she helped build it. That day, She sat at the piano, surrounded by a hushed crowd and the cold stare of live TV cameras. Then she began to play St. Louis Blues, a song woven into the fabric of their love, their legacy, their music. Her hands moved with memory, each note carrying echoes of heartbreak and harmony, of the years they shared both on stage and off. It wasn't just a performance. It was a goodbye wrapped in melody, a final love letter. Then, without warning, tragedy struck. In the middle of her tribute, right there at the piano, Lil Harden Armstrong collapsed. A massive heart attack stole her away mid-song, mid-performance, as the stunned audience looked on in silence and disbelief. She was rushed to the hospital but pronounced dead just an hour later. She was 73. Lil died as she lived, at the piano, wrapped in music, forever tied to the man whose legacy she helped write. It felt almost scripted by fate, a final, heartbreaking crescendo to a lifetime of sound. But hers is not the only story like that. Imagine a soul singer collapsing mid-scream, mid-verse, as a nightclub crowd gasps and the music dies in an instant. When that happens, something inside all of us goes quiet. Because when music falls silent like that, it's not just a note that ends. It's a life. Philipe Win. July 14, 1984, Oakland, California. Ivy's nightclub was electric that night, alive with sweat, rhythm, and soul. The crowd wasn't just here for a show. They were here for a legend. Philipe Win. Once the soaring voice behind the spinners, Win wasn't just a singer, he was a storm. His high-flying tenor, wild ad-libs, and unchained charisma had turned hits like I'll Be Around, Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, and the Rubber Band Man into soul anthems. Even after going solo, the fire never dimmed. Neither did the love from his fans. That night, he was unstoppable. Backed by a band in perfect groove, Philipe was a preacher of sound, delivering each note with raw, electrifying passion. He didn't just perform. He testified. He lifted the room higher with every breath. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, it happened. Just as he hit a climactic high note, mid-performance, his body gave out. Philipe collapsed on stage, felled by a massive heart attack in the middle of doing what he was born to do. The cheers turned to gasps. The music stopped. The room fell into stunned silence, then chaos. He was only 43, still in his prime, still pouring joy into every lyric. To lose him like that, right in the spotlight mid-song, was a devastating blow. Philipe Win didn't just sing songs, he became them. And on that stage, in front of a crowd that adored him, one of soul music's brightest lights was extinguished, live, and far too soon. Lee Morgan. February 19, 1972. A freezing night blanketed in snow across New York City. Inside Slug's Saloon, a dimly lit, smoke-filled jazz club buried in the East Village, the air crackled with heat and horn. At the heart of it all stood Lee Morgan. Not just a trumpeter, but a jazz prodigy. A fire starter. A man who joined Dizzy Gillespie's band before he could even vote, who helped define the hard bop sound with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, and who soared to fame with the iconic hit The Sidewinder. Lee had clawed his way back from the edge. Addiction had nearly devoured him, but he'd found his rhythm again, playing not just with skill, but with soul, fury, and purpose. That night began like many others. Sets were played. Applause roared. But then, everything changed. After a late set, Lee lingered, maybe savoring the moment, maybe preparing for more. Among the crowd was Helen Moore, his common-law wife. The woman who had saved his life, nursed him through withdrawal, and stood by him through darkness. Their bond was fierce, complicated, and when they argued that night, it exploded, loud, raw, and public. What was said between them is lost to time. But what followed will never be forgotten. Helen was thrown out of the club. Minutes later, she returned, with the very gun Lee had once given her for protection. In front of friends, fans, and fellow musicians, she pulled the trigger. A shot rang out, and Lee Morgan, the man whose horn could cry and scream and dance, collapsed. Silenced. Not by drugs. Not by time. But by a single act of love twisted into violence. Outside, the snowstorm raged. Inside, Lee bled out on the floor. The ambulance crawled through the blizzard, but it was too late. He was gone. Just 33 years old. He didn't die in a hospital bed or fade away in obscurity. He died doing what he loved, on the battlefield of sound, moments after making magic. It was one of the most haunting tragedies in jazz history. A love story that turned deadly. A genius not lost to fame or excess, but to passion, chaos, and the brutal finality of a bullet. And if you thought that was heartbreaking, just wait, because the next story takes us backstage with a rising R&B star whose final moment wasn't applause or spotlight, but a reckless, unbelievable twist that ended everything in an instant. Jackie Wilson. September 29, 1975. The Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey was buzzing with energy. Fans packed the venue, eager to witness Mr. Excitement himself. Jackie Wilson, the electrifying dynamo with a 4-octave voice and dance moves that would one day inspire Michael Jackson, was about to hit the stage. His voice had given life to classics like Lonely Teardrops, Reet Petite, and Your Love Keeps Lifting Me, higher and higher. Every show was a storm of soul, passion, and sweat, pure musical electricity. That night, Jackie was performing as part of Dick Clark's Good Ol' Rock and Roll Revue. Some say he had just launched into Lonely Teardrops, pouring every ounce of emotion into the lyrics, when tragedy struck. Mid-performance, Jackie collapsed. A massive heart attack and stroke struck him down in front of a stunned audience. As he fell, his head hit the stage hard, causing devastating brain damage. But Jackie Wilson didn't die that night. His body lived on, but the fire, the spirit, the unmatched charisma that once lit up arenas, was gone. He slipped into a coma, a long and silent prison that would last nearly 9 painful years. The man who once brought audiences to their feet now lay motionless in a hospital bed, barely clinging to life. On January 21, 1984, Jackie Wilson passed away from pneumonia. He was only 49. His death wasn't sudden, but it was heartbreakingly slow. The lights didn't go out with a bang, but with a long, cruel fade. For a man who helped shape the very soul of American music, this was no fitting curtain call. It was a tragedy. Jackie Wilson didn't just fall that night. A piece of musical history fell with him. Wilson Pickett. The Wicked Pickett. January 19, 2006. Reston, Virginia. Soul music's fiercest flame burned bright one last time. He wasn't the unstoppable chart topper of the 60s anymore, but when he hit that stage at 64, you'd never know it. The sweat poured, the voice roared, and the fire, oh the fire, still lit up every corner of the room. In the midnight hour, Mustang Sally, Land of 1,000 Dances. These weren't just songs. They were soul-born battle cries. And Wilson gave them everything he had, like it was his first show, or maybe like he knew it would be his last. The crowd roared as he left the stage, still trembling from the raw electricity he delivered. But behind the curtain, away from the spotlight, his heart betrayed him. He collapsed, rushed to a hospital. But it was too late. The man who once shook the earth with his wild voice and ferocious energy had sung his final note. He didn't die mid-song, but he left every ounce of life out there on that stage. It was a finale written in sweat, in screams, in soul. The Wicked Pickett danced his last dance, shouted his last "na na 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 na," with applause still echoing through the air. The midnight hour had struck, tragically, poetically, fatally. There's something haunting about a legend who gives so much, they don't make it back from the spotlight. It feels more like folklore than fact. A final curtain call disguised as a thunderous performance. You come for the music, the magic, the escape. But sometimes, unknowingly, you witness a goodbye in real time. It's beautiful, it's brutal, and it stays with you. For the fans left in stunned silence, the show was heartbreakingly, unforgettably over. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to share and subscribe for more untold truths behind the music.